Okay, in this last installment of this Module 4 series of lectures, we're going to talk a little bit about natural law. And in the Oren Lyons piece, he talks about natural law. And the jurisprudential people, the people who are the jurists, great thinkers about law in the Western tradition, have tried to define natural law. And they've done through from an anthropocentric perspective about how do you make natural law apply to human beings. And that's probably fine considering the Western tradition. But when we look at an indigenous tradition, what we see is that the natural law is simply the laws of nature. We see them through observation. When we look at this picture in front of us, we can see the power of the water eroding these rocks. We see these trees, these juniper trees up against the rocks. We see the grasses in the foreground. We see these two rocks on either side facing, basically lifting up in kind of odd angles facing each other. These are the result of natural forces. And it's through watching these natural forces for these generations and generations and generations that we come to understand what the natural laws are. Now, the West has done that to a large degree. The early scientists back in the 1500s and 1600s spent a lot of their effort defining what those natural laws are. We're all familiar with Newton and discovering the law of gravity, and then he writes these other laws of motion. Something like an object at rest stays at rest until acted upon by another force. Basically, he just I used to play a lot of pool, and I found his laws to be very accurate. But then there's those laws have been pretty much written down and categorized, and so they exist not only in real life, but you can go pick up a book and you can read about the application of those natural laws. But there is a question about when do those natural laws begin to apply to human communities? We know that human beings always add an element of emotion because that's what we are. We are, as much as we're thinking beings, we're also feeling beings, and we're sentient, meaning we can sense things and respond to things. And so our emotions are involved in an awful lot of things that we see. So when we see the natural law in process, for example, the lion killing the zebra in the African plains, part of our heart goes out of concern to the zebra. And some people might go so far as to say, "Oh, that shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that way." But the reality is that that's the natural law. It's been going on for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. That's the nature of this planet. And but when we start applying these to our own humanity, then we start trying to figure out, exactly how does natural law apply. And we know that as was stated in the article, that there's no appeal. If you break nature's law, then nature comes down on you pretty hard. And so we have to know what these laws are. We have to know how to apply them in the natural world, and we also have to know how to apply them within our own relationships. And one of the things, there's words in every tribal language that recognizes our very basic humanity and recognizes that with that humanity comes a moral obligation to other human beings, to animals, to plants, and to the earth as a whole. And in some ways, this is a very important part of our indigenous knowledge, is understanding our place within the whole scheme of things. In Africa, there's a word called Ubuntu, which is kind of like saying that there's a humanity that we share, and because we share that humanity, we live together in peace, and we live together with respect, and we live together with love. And a lot of tribes have that same concept. A lot of tribes here in North and South America have that same concept. A lot of tribes in Africa and Asia and other places throughout the world where there's still tribal people, that concept still exists. Now, there are certain aspects of the natural law that we might consider universal because it's the nature of our planet and the nature of our world. And first of all, it starts off with what we talked about earlier in the indigenous knowledge section when we talked about things being relationally defined. Things are defined by their relationships with others. Well, once you do that, once you establish that things do not exist into themselves, but they are defined by their relationship with others, then you realize that part of the obligation there is this idea of reciprocity, that there's a responsibility to give back. It's a give and take relationship. So when the lion is killing the zebra, the zebra knows that it's being killed, and it gives up its life so that the lion can eat. Later on, the lion passes away, gets killed in a fight with another lion, or gets shot by a hunter, or just dies of old age or disease, and that body provides food for other animals and provides nutrients for the grass, for the grass to grow so the zebra can eat. The next generation of zebras can eat. And so there's a reciprocity there. It's not a one-to-one reciprocity where you know what we call quid pro quo, you give me this, I'll give you that. But it's a kind of a holistic systems-based reciprocity. Also, because we're acknowledging reciprocity, we also acknowledge that there's a duality in this world. That a lot of what this planet is made up of is a dual nature. And primarily we see that in terms of male and female sexual reproduction. But we also see it in other ways as well. We see it in thermodynamics, where you have heat and cold. We see it in electromagnetism, where it's a positive and negative. We can see it in a number of places. I mean, anytime anything that our minds can conceive, there's almost always an opposite. Even in the political world and economic world, and Marx talked about the thesis and antithesis, and so there's always this opposite, the sense of opposite, the sense of duality. It's even an image of this duality is the yin and yang symbol. The circle with the kind of wavy line in the middle that divides that circle into two equal parts, both shapes being the same, one yin and one yang. And so, so we see that duality is essentially the basis for this planet, and it exists, and that's part of this interlocking relationship where duality exists because everything exists in relation to something else. When babies are born, the first thing that they become aware of for the first few weeks of their life is their own body. They know that when their body is hungry, they cry, they eat, and they excrete, and they sleep, and they begin to know. They don't necessarily know how to control their body, but they learn what their body is. They realize they have legs and arms and feet and toes and that kind of thing. But there comes a point where when the baby realizes that not only is there a me, which is this body, but there's a not me, meaning there's something other than me in the world. And that is the beginning of our understanding of the dual nature. And it's something that's just a part of our lives. Our indigenous knowledge builds upon that and creates obligations based in relationship. And so we have this reciprocity as being one of the major laws in this world, on this planet. In the Bible, it's talked about as live by the sword, die by the sword, or reaping what you sow. So both terms come out of the Bible. In Eastern religion, it's called karma. And it's just simply knowing that what you put out into the world will come back to you. If you put out good, you'll get good back. If you put out bad, you'll get bad back. And so that's part of the nature of reciprocity that exists because of the duality or the dual nature of this planet. Now, these are some of the natural laws, and there are not very many of them that you would say they're just absolutely universal. I mean, even gravity as a natural law is relative because there's places where there's no gravity. Um, so a lot of the physical laws are subject to bioregional and other forces that may change their application. But as far as I can tell, as far as I've seen, there hasn't been very much that changes the nature of relationship, reciprocity, or duality as we go through this world. And these are part of the bases for our understanding of indigenous knowledge. Is how do these things impact um, how we see the world and how we act in the world, and what we see as our rights and our obligations, and how these things play out within our communities and the land that we live on.